do have just a little bit of a Southern accent. I had a friend, Doug, call me and he said, Robin, if I come to hear your presentation, do I have to wear hang-up clothes? Because if I have to wear hang-up clothes, it might just be above my raisins. And I understood exactly what he meant, even though I'm looking out there and I'm seeing some furrowed brows. Hang-up clothes, the suit, Sunday go to meet and stuff, nice clothes. But above his raisins? Does anybody know what that is? Anybody from the South? Okay, do you know what that is? Those of you from the South. Above his raisins? Above the way that he was raised. I caught you. We're thinking about those little tiny black raisins, weren't you? Okay, if I say anything like that today that you don't really get, and I see those furrowed brows, I'll try to put it in the English language and out of West Virginia language for you. Okay, this picture up here is from April 21st, 1958. And this is my mama up here. I was born in July. When you look at this, which one of those women do you think is my mother? Okay, it's not the one that's sitting. That's a good suggestion.
The one staring off into space?
Not the one standing on this side over here. Your far right is my mother. Does she look almost 9 months pregnant? Come on. And of course the article says Mr. and Mrs. Tom George, Mr. and Mrs. because they couldn't put their first names in the paper. You know how they used to do that. This picture is from the JCETs. And my mother was the consummate volunteer. My mother volunteered for Head Start, Circle, Women's Club, JCETs. My mother was always volunteering for anything. Now, if I asked my mother, which I did, Mom, did you raise money? Mom's, no, I never raised money. But see, my mother knew how to prospect because she believed so much in all of these organizations, and she knew, because we lived in this small rural town in southern West Virginia called Beckley, she knew what people were interested in and people who would give money to whichever one of these that she volunteered for. My mother was always doing prospecting, although I asked her this question and she said, yeah, I didn't think you even noticed when I did all of that stuff. And I said, yeah, I saw you volunteering. When we talk about prospecting is that people get a little uncomfortable. They start shifting in their chairs. You talk about prospecting with your board, and your board's going to go, oh, you're going to get one of those wealth screening things, and you're going to wealth screen me, and then it's going to be all wrong. They get really uncomfortable with this. When we ask them to help us prospect, whether we're talking volunteers, board members, donors, or maybe even ourselves, we get just a tad uncomfortable because what does prospecting mean? What I'm hoping to do as we go through today is the learning objectives. We're going to talk about what steps do you need to do to prospect, knowing how to discover what those potential prospects are and where to find their interests, and understand what prospect is and what it isn't. And then we're going to talk about some tools and resources. Some of them are free. Some of them you already use, but I'm hoping I can give you some tips that will help you use them more effectively. And then how can you prospect within your own database? Even if you're just using Excel spreadsheets, and those of you that know me know that I'm always saying, you've got to have a database, you've got to have a database. But sometimes we're still on Excel spreadsheets, and I get that. But you can still prospect within those because you have a gold mine that's inside your database. Okay, this is the outline that we're going to go through. So what and how of prospect research. What are the elements of prospect research? There's something called an activity trap. And when you're doing prospecting, that activity trap just will come up and bite you. Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh, I'm going to spend 10 minutes on this. And then, oh, you find this article and you find this, and oh, wow, that took you to Facebook. Oh, I didn't know. All of a sudden, 2 hours has gone by, and it was like, now, what was I even looking for when I started? So we want to be sure that you're not going to go down that rabbit hole. And then there's a piece of it that's ethical prospect research. If you can talk to your board members and your volunteers and your donors that you're asking to help you prospect and tell them your process so that you will be doing ethical prospect research. And then how do we go about looking at the major gift cycle and what are we going to do in that cycle today? What do we want to know and where are we looking? How do you qualify it? You can have lists and lists of people, but do you have a way to qualify who you actually look for more information on? And then what kind of prospect management system are you going to use? Why do we even need to prospect? And so does anybody in here have all the donors they need? They don't need another single donor. I don't see any hands. What we see happening in Eagle County, because that's where I live, and I do work as a fundraising consultant throughout the rural communities, but what we see is that people are getting older. People are moving away so that they can be closer to whether it be health resources or it's easier for them to breathe or they get out of the snow or they're passing away. There's a lot of nonprofits that depend on the money from these particular donors, and then moving into the future, they don't know what they're going to do. I had a board member come to me, and he had been to, you might know, Bravo Vale, and he had been to a symphony performance at Bravo Vale, and he came back and he said, I thought I walked into a box of Q-tips. And I went, because of all the white hair? And he said, so we're going to be in trouble if we don't do some prospecting. Okay, so how do we maximize the support? Because many times what happens is that somebody's given us $15, somebody's given us $100, and I have gone through multiple databases of my clients, and I have found that a lot of their largest donors, 6- and 7-figure donors, started out with $100. And we need to be looking within our database. And then how do we track those prospects? And then how do we improve our gift raising, our major gift fundraising, and measure effectiveness? Okay, you all probably seen this management cycle, and there's lots of different people that do it lots of different ways. But you know that first off you have to identify, and then you qualify, you develop a strategy, you cultivate them, you solicit, you acknowledge and recognize, you steward, you renew them, and then you start all over again. There's so many times that I watch people jump from the identify to the solicit. And that's where we get into trouble. I worked for someone who he had never been the president before of the university, and we were going to meet this donor who he and his wife had flown their private jet in. They were going to have lunch with us, and on the way I had the discussion, and I'm sure you all have done this, we will not be asking for money today. This is the first time we've ever met him. Within 10 minutes, he asked him for $1 million. I was just mortified. But interestingly, the donor said, who had been president of the university too, you don't have the right to ask me for money. You don't have the right to ask me for money until we have met at least 10 times. And then you can ask me for money. As we left, he turned to me and said, my boss turned to me and said, I thought that went pretty well, didn't he? And I said, except for the part where you asked for $1 million. We set up another meeting for a tour of the facility. Had the same conversation again. It took him about 20 minutes this time. And this time, he didn't quite ask for $1 million. He asked for $750,000. What this donor said was, he said, I will give you money. When my stock matures, I will transfer some stock to you, because he had sold his company to Boeing. He had a lot of money that he could invest with us. Money didn't come, money didn't come. The next time, I learned my lesson. So I told my boss, I said, okay, so you know what? My development director and I are going to go out and meet with him and his wife this time. We're going to go to where they are. You're busy, and et cetera. He walks in by himself without his wife. And I knew at that point that we were not going to get any money from him, and we didn't. He told us we weren't on the top 10 of organizations that he was going to give to. And I said, how do we get on that top 10? And he said, you don't. We need to look at this cycle and be sure that we're developing these prospects so that we aren't jumping to the ask too soon. So today, in the time that we have, we're just going to look at these first two. We're going to look at the identify and the qualify piece. Okay, the what and why of prospect research. It's just a system. That's all it is. It's a system of recording the data that you need on people who are prospective donors. And why are we going to do this? Because it helps us identify shared values. When your board comes to you and says, oh, that wealth management stuff, why do you all do that? Why do you do all that searches and why do you know all that stuff about me? Instead, yes, we're looking at that piece, but we're looking at what is important to them. What do they give money to? That piece of it is just as important to us as do they have money to give us a major gift. Okay, so what prospect research can do, it can help you expand your database. You can upgrade gifts from your current donors because you see what they've given to other organizations. It helps you plan solicitations and end-of-year appeal. So a lot of times, and this is because we don't have enough staff, we just send an appeal, the same appeal to everyone. One year, we decided that let's see if we segment our database based on their interests. And we know that these people are interested in engineering. We know these people are interested in scholarships. We wrote 13 different appeal letters. It was a nightmare when we talked about who goes on this list and who goes on this list and how much did they give and were they alumni or were they a board member or blah, 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 blah. But it was just a test because we wanted to see what would happen. We raised more money that end-of-year appeal than had ever been raised before. And it's because we had done the research and we knew what each of them were interested in. Okay, then go back to this. And then prioritize and manage your activities. So what's most important is connecting with the donor where they are. When we do that, and we're going to get into that in just a minute, it needs to be sequential. Where I talked about how you go down this rabbit hole and, ooh, look at that article. Ooh, look at that. Ooh, what about this? We need to have a sequential system so we know exactly what we're looking for. And what that'll help you do when you have that system, it will help you stay on track because you know exactly what it is that you're looking for. It needs to be cumulative and ongoing because things change. Somebody passes away and they inherit money, right? So they have been given to this one nonprofit and they're upset with this nonprofit and they're not going to give to that nonprofit anymore. And guess what? You know that. You are ready to come in and ask them if they're interested in getting involved in your organization. It needs to be realistic. It needs to include field and online sources. We can do all this prospect research. We can Google them. We can look at these sites. We can do wealth screenings. But a lot of times, information out there is not exactly accurate. And if we ask their peers no, that is your best source of information. Our peers, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. How do you get your peers to volunteer that information? And it needs to be organized and accessible by others. Again, those of you that know me know that I say everything has to go in the database. Every note, every time you see somebody, except, there's always exceptions to the rule, except when you're talking about prospecting. What I feel like with prospecting is that until this person engages with me, I'm not going to put them in the database because they may never engage with us, ever. I went out to coffee with this person who I knew she liked youth organizations. I knew that she had the capacity to give. I knew that she had a relationship with me. And within 10 minutes of us sitting down, she said, I never give to Christian education. End of story. I wouldn't have put her in the database because until I actually knew that she was going to give, or at least she was going to volunteer, or at least she was not, I hate everything to do with this and don't even talk to me about it. Okay, let's talk about ethical prospect research and then we'll get into that piece. Why do we even need this prospect information? If it's just that we're being nosy, somebody described it like it's looking through the curtains into somebody's house, looking through the window, and that's uncomfortable for people. So we need to be clear about why are we looking at this information so that then we can explain it to somebody else. And then is it going to help us create a strategy? Is there something that we're hoping to find that's going to help us? And if our donors or prospects were to ask us, how do we know so much information? Would we feel comfortable, and with integrity, would we feel comfortable telling them about our research process? I had a development person say to me the other day that she was having lunch with this woman and said to her, she said, "Oh, did you see that the New York Symphony was coming this year?" Whatever. And this woman became irate. She said, "I can't believe you development people. All you do is research us and you have all this information on us." And she just went ballistic. And the development person felt about this big. After the woman finished, she said, "You realized you told me that you were going to that New York Symphony, right?" And the woman said, "Oh, I am so sorry. I am so tired of people researching me and then coming and feeding the information back to me." When we do ethical prospect research, we need to be careful what we say about what we know. It's a game where you plant a seed. "Oh, I love the symphony," and see if they respond. "Oh, yeah." And if they don't, you keep moving, because you want to be able to tell them how you found this information. This is our responsibility. Once they become donors, the information is confidential. Prior to that, it's public information. However, people have a right to privacy. We just need to be careful, especially if you have wealth screening software. You have access to all kinds of information that people don't know that you know. Who their kids are, their ex-wives are, their birthdays. You have all kinds of information. We just need to be sure that we're protecting our donors. And there is donor prospecting has its own, what's it called, Bill of Rights. And at APRA, APRA, it's the Association of Prospect Research or whatever, you can see what that donor Bill of Rights is. I had this board member. We used to give, and maybe you all do this, we used to give board members the name of the people who've given and how much they gave so that then they could call and thank them, right? I had this surgeon who was on my board, and he didn't have much of a filter. He's at a party, and he walks up to somebody and said, "I can't believe you only gave $5,246. What's wrong with you?" And I said it loudly so that others could hear, and I said, "That's the last time we'll do that. Never again will I give an exact dollar amount." So when you publish your annual report, you might call them levels, like the Alpine level, and you give a range, right? That's all I ever give board members now, is a range when I want them to make thank you calls, so that doesn't happen again. Okay, so we have a responsibility to protect the gift they've given, to protect their race, their status, jobs they were fired from, and being sure we make notes in the database that are donor-centered. Always remember, if the donor is standing over your shoulder and was reading what you wrote, would you feel comfortable about it? Whether you're putting it on the Excel spreadsheet or whether you're putting it in the database. There's sometimes when there's security issues. When I worked at the University in Oregon, we had some people who we were a little concerned about, and the security would have to throw them off campus. But we didn't want to put that in the database because a lot of people had access to the database if we put it in that particular person's record. So the head of security's name was Ed Daniels. So in our database, we put a pop-up screen that said, "Knows Ed Daniels." And so when this person called or when he came in, that screen would pop up and would go, "Danger. We need to alert security to know that he's going to be on campus." Okay, and then focus on benefiting the donor so they can give to what they like, because that's the whole idea behind why we're doing prospecting. You have somebody over here that wants to support the organization, and you have a need over here. Our job as development people are to bring those two together so that donor can give to what they want to give to. That's what we're doing in prospect research. Okay, so this is the first part of that cycle where we're going to look at identifying. But before we do that, let's have everybody stand up. It's after lunch, and these seats are like way comfortable, and it's dark in here. Okay. So here's what I want everybody to do. Take your right hand and point to the ceiling with your index finger. I saw that. Okay, so what I want you to do is look up at this finger and pretend like it's a helicopter rotor and start going in a clockwise direction. So as you look, some of you are having trouble with clockwise. Okay. We don't use clocks anymore. Okay, so your helicopter rotor is turning, right? And so now your helicopter's beginning to land. So bring that and keep going in a clockwise direction and bring it below your waist. Okay, so what happened? Okay, so do it again. Up here, clockwise direction. Okay, keep going clockwise and land your helicopter. What happened? What happened? Look down at your finger.
Switch direction.
Yeah, you're going counterclockwise now, aren't you? So what happened between here, clockwise, and here, counterclockwise? Exactly, she's got it, ding ding. Different perspective. Okay, you can have a seat. Okay, everybody's awake now.
We all know how to fly a helicopter.
You what? Know how to fly a helicopter. Okay, so you all can go out and rent a helicopter now. You know how to fly one. So that's what we're doing when we're talking about identifying prospects. It's looking at it from a different perspective. Just like that, you'll remember that you were landing your helicopter. How can you look at this from a little bit different perspective? So this is the wheel of responsibility. So if you think about this for yourself first, and you put yourself in the middle here. You know the story I told about my mother at the beginning? It doesn't matter whether she was at the grocery store, or she was at church, or she was at one of her meetings. She knew what people were interested in. So you probably think about some of this when you're at the grocery store and think, wonder if that person knows what we're doing and the new program. Now, caution here. Let me ask you, you go to the grocery store and you see somebody around the corner. Oh no, they're going to ask me for money. Oh no. And you turn and go the other way. Do you know those people? Or they're going to ask you to volunteer. And you're like, oh no. You don't want to be one of those people, right? So you don't want to approach people and say, oh, you won't believe what. No. So what you're trying to do is find a way to get those people to tell you what they're interested in. Hey, what have you been doing recently? What's new? And you hope then they'll turn around and ask you, so what's new with you? Are you still working where you were before? What are you all doing now? So you've been invited into that conversation. But think about all these different areas where you interact with people, that there are potential donors everywhere you are. Okay, so now we've done it for ourselves, but now think about your board. So you put your board member's name in there and say, okay, so if I had my board members do this, which I have board members do this, I have something called a board decision book that we work through with the board and find out who they know, who they can connect us with, and what things that they will do to help the organization. You all probably know this, but board members have never known anybody in their whole life. They don't know anybody now, and they'll never know anybody in the future. So if you ask them, hey, would you give me some names of people? What do they say? I don't know anybody. I don't want to ask them for money, right? So what we need to do is find a way to help these board members give us the information that we need to help us. Okay, so how do we do that? After I experienced that several times of board members saying they didn't know anybody, what I would do is I would do a little research on this board member and find out things about them and say, oh, I bet he knows Susie. Oh, I bet he knows. And I would customize a list of names. And then I would meet with that board member And they'd say, oh, Robin, I don't know anybody. Okay, let's just see. Do you happen to know such and such? I know their daughter. Oh, you do? Is there a way that you would be willing to connect us with her? Oh, no, I don't want to ask him for money. No, you don't have to ask for money. So would you be willing to call and set up a meeting for us to go out together? No. Would you be willing to let me call and use your name? Maybe. Would you be willing to write an email to him? So I have this list of things that I go through on each name on the list. That has worked masterfully. It's a lot of work to figure out who these board members know, but what happens in the end is then they are giving you information that now you have a connection to these people. Okay, so that's the wheel of role of responsibilities. This is the constituency model. It goes from the inside out. So your inner core are your board members, they are your major donors, and then the management of your organization, whatever that looks like. You may be just the only person in your organization. But so when we look at this center core, this is where we need to start prospecting, is to have them help us and connect us to people. I had somebody say to me the other day, I said, what made you so successful? She had been a fundraiser for 40 years and retired. She said, my board. She said, I couldn't do it without my board. We just need to get them to help us and help them to help us. Okay, so that's the inner circle. Then we get out to the next circle, and those are the employees, our general donors, so maybe not our major donors, our clients, and then next is our former participants, our former board members, and then the next area out is people with similar interests, and then the whole organization universe. So if I had you do this, I would have you list, okay, so these are the board members, and these are people I think they know. And so I would have you do this, but we don't have enough time to do this, so we're not going to do this right now. But I want you to think about how you would structure this model if you were doing it. Okay, let's talk about research steps. Okay, so who are we researching? What do we want to know? What can we find out about them? Are they somebody who we think could potentially be involved, recording the notes and determining next steps? Basically, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for linkage, ability, and interest. Do they have some link to our organization? Do they have the ability to give? And do they have the interest? So basically, it boils down to the capacity, the inclination, the affinity to give. So you've probably had this happen. It sounds like I'm picking on board members, but I'm not picking on board members. This happens with volunteers. It happens with donors, where that they'll call up and say, hey, Robin, I was in the Pacific Northwest. Did you call Bill Gates? Tell me, you all heard that, right? And I'm like, the eye roll doesn't happen in front of them, but it happens in my mind. And I'm like, wow, that's a great idea. Bill Gates Foundation gives out a lot of money. Do you happen to know him? Ooh, no, I don't. I'll tell you though, so every time that comes up, do you know Jeff Bezos? Do you know? So I'll go through that. So one of my board members said, you need to call the Walton Foundation, Walmart. Yeah, okay. Oh, that's a great idea. Walmart gives to a lot of different things. I said, do you know him? And she said, oh, I don't know him, but I know his son. We do fly fishing up on my farm, and Sam's son comes up there every year. I'm like, great. Okay, so then I start creating that prospecting list of, okay, so how are we going to get her to connect us with Sam Walton's son? That question, though, it always works if we turn it around and we're nice about it and they don't see my eye roll on the inside. Okay. So when you do a system, and I'll show you what mine looks like here in just a minute, but these are all the things that I want to know about somebody. You've got the name and the address and all that, geographical area, wealth code, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. What their gift rating is, their interest rate, their giving areas, and so what I do is I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I've created this 10-touch process that I highlight each column when we start moving through the 10 touches. And the 10 touches are things like, it may be visiting the facility, it may be taking a tour, it may be meeting one of the participants. It can be any number of things depending on the organization. So what mine looks like is something like this, where I put their name along the right-hand side, and then I put what I want to know up at the top, like their occupation, their job title, and those type of things. And then I fill in those columns. Whenever I'm making my contacts, then I look at that and say, okay, this is where I think that they would fit into our organization. This is where I think I need to go with this contact. And where to look for this information. We talked about peers, periodicals. Newspapers are great. We're so fortunate to have Google, but what can happen is we get caught in that activity trap, but sometimes newspapers have really good information for us. The reactive research is when a board member calls and says, so did you call Bill Gates? Corporate research, if you this morning were here for the grant research presentation, she talked a lot about the corporate research. What sometimes that we forget to look at, if somebody's retired from a company that does matching gifts, a lot of times they will still do a matching gift. So it may be a one-to-one match. And so asking them where they worked before, and then when we do our research, to look for corporate research. And then, of course, foundation research. Family foundations at this point have started asking for proposals where before they didn't. We're seeing that a lot in Eagle County. I don't know if you all are seeing it too, where we used to we have a relationship, we'll just call you up. Now they're asking for proposals. And then push technology, things like Market Watch. You can do a Google alert. And okay, so where can we find information? And then we're gonna go through this in just a minute, just how I would research somebody. Okay, of course, Google. You've set up Google Alerts, right? So a Google alert, you go into Google and you type in whether it's the name of your organization, and you might type in your competitor's organization. You might type in anything that you're interested in for your nonprofit, and then you get an alert from Google that comes to you in your email anytime that's in any news. Of course, homes. If you want to know their home price, to know if they have capacity, it's Zillow. And Hoovers, that's going to give you corporate information if they work for large organizations. Foundation Directory Online, that's one of my favorite places to go to find out family foundation information. In Eagle County, the Avon Library has access to it. I don't know if any of the other counties do, but it's an expensive program. Okay, good. That's one of the only one of the family or the foundation research programs that I found that actually put family foundations in there. So when you search for a family foundation, you'll come up with names of people you're like, whoa, they've got a family foundation? I didn't even know about them. Okay, of course we talked about newspapers, Facebook, LinkedIn, other social media, that pulls up on Google. I put Muckety up here, I think. Yeah, I left Muckety up here. I am so sad about Muckety. Did anybody know Muckety? Muckety was a program that you put somebody's name in, and that's in the center area. It told you every board they were on, everybody they were connected with, and then you could click on, like it says Cornell University, there's a little plus. You could click on the plus, and it tells you everybody that's on that board, so you know every person that this person's related to. Muckety went under last year, and I'm very sad about it. And the reason I keep it up here is because they keep saying on Facebook, oh, we're going to get Muckety to come back. We're going to get it to come back. It hasn't come back yet, but I put it up here because I'm very sad and I want it to come back. Okay, setting up a newsfeed, white pages. If you're looking for lawyers, there's a site called Martindale. Doctors, of course, the AMA site you probably know. Zoom Info will give you general information for just business information. And you know that every time somebody gives or you give to an election of some type, an elected official, that's public information. You can glean a lot of information, phone numbers, their addresses, email addresses, if you go to that federal election site. People Finders and Been Verified. I'm really disappointed in this too. The program I used to use, I don't remember what the site was, but it was like a People Finders. Wells, whatchamacallit, Been Verified bought it. So what happens when has anybody used Been Verified? Oh, it's miserable. Because they give you, if you look up yourself on Been Verified, they give you every piece of information from every house you own from the day that you walked out of grade school. It has everything. And so it is so overwhelming with the amount of information. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, let's finish this. Okay, 990s, you can go to GuideStar, you just need to register, and GuideStar's free. Then Charity Navigator 2. Interestingly, if your nonprofit's not listed on one or both of these, a lot of times that's where donors are going today to check you out, is they're going to GuideStar and they're going to Charity Navigator. So be sure you're on there. Fill out your profile. It's not really that hard. You don't have to fill in all the information, but the more you fill in, the more that donors will be able to look at you. Okay, this next one, people use the annual reports, and I know that's hard. But an organization like yours, they publish their annual report, right? And they've got all the donors listed. Okay, that's a source of information. It's not my favorite, but it's there. Those of you that are sitting on the end of the aisle, I don't know if it's over here, but I do know if it's over here. What do you see on the armrest?
Names.
Names on the armrests of people who have given money. So there's lots of places on donor walls and that type of thing that you can see names of people that you might not have thought of. Of course, alumni organizations are great. Even if you're not an educational institution, alumni organizations a lot of times will list when somebody had a baby and where they work and what they do. So finding the alumni association is important. Community foundations, of course, corporate and business websites, and then J3SG gives you some insider information, but typically it has to be publicly traded for it to be listed there. Okay, so let's do a little individual practice. Okay, so we have Thomas S. and Cecilia Irwin. Okay, so here's where I found this, and a lot of you all probably already do this, but if you go to your county assessor's site, have you all done this? And you search for recent purchases. What you come up with is all the people who've bought houses. You can export it, and then you can rank it, list it, according to how much they paid. Okay, so now you just have a list of either new people who've moved in that most likely have the capacity to give because you've chosen people at a certain dollar amount, house and above, right? Okay, so you have them, but who else do you have on this list? You have people who just sold their house. So what happened with people who just sold it? They just came into a bunch of money, right? Because they just sold their house. So going to the county assessor site and looking up this information. Okay, so that's where I got this. And I'm pretty sure that this came off of the Steamboat one, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think this was off the Steamboat one. Okay, so you see this name. What are you going to do? What's your first thing? What you going to do? Google them. Okay. How are you going to Google them? What are you going to put into Google?
Several wild cards. First name, wild cards, last name, someone quotes.
Describe wild card. She said put in first name wild card, last name wild card. Describe wild card.
I would do one that's the generic wild card that gives you everything in the middle as opposed to a single character wild card.
Okay, so she said she'd do a generic one as opposed to a single one. So tell us what a generic wild card is.
On Google, it's a star.
Okay, so it's a star in Google. Okay, and okay, so she would do that, and so what would that do for us? What does that wild card do for us?
Fills in any of the characters in there in between your search terms.
Okay, so it fills in any of the characters in between your search terms. So what she might do is put in Thomas, Star, Cecilia, Irwin. Okay, what else would you do? Okay, there you go. Steamboat Springs. She said, comma, Steamboat Springs. I wouldn't use a comma. What would you use? Not a comma. What would you use?
And.
What was it?
And.
Plus sign.
Plus sign. There you go. Okay, so name +, Steamboat Springs. So what that tells Google is that Google's just going to look for the Irwins in Steamboat Springs. Okay, what else would you do to narrow down this search?
You sure you're at quotes around Steamboat and Springs?
Okay, she just said put quotes around Steamboat Springs. You could take this name and say Thomas Irwin, put quotes around it, plus quotes around Steamboat Springs, Colorado. When I did that, what I came up with was, let's see if I put that on here. Yep, I did, but I can't go there from here. Okay, so what I found was that he's on the management team of this huge organization. So I searched that corporation, I searched that corporation, and I came up with him being listed on Bloomberg and found out that he is the executive vice president of Hyco Corporation. So now I've got enough to go on that I know he has the capacity. I know some of what he gives to because when I went to that, it was the first one up there, it talked about him. It said he was married. It said he had 2 kids. I knew it was the right person because it said his wife's name was Cecilia. So what happens is when you use quotes and the wild card, it hones in your search and it cuts down your research time tremendously so that then you don't go down those rabbit holes. Okay, so here's another one. This one was also Steamboat Springs, and I found it in the Routt County Assessors. I found an article in Steamboat Today. When I read the article in Steamboat Today, they had bought this bed and breakfast. I was like, oh, that's interesting. In the article, it said that Perry is married to Abby Schisler. I would have never known that. So now I can search Abby Schisler, and I found out that they were in Steamboat Magazine for the owners of this Bella Vista, whatever it's called. Okay, so you see how this works. So Google's totally free, and we can take one person and do a little research. You've got your list from the county assessor, which is a great place to start, and now you start researching them. Okay. Then one of the ones that I was looking for was Eric Allen and Margaret McConnell. Again, I did a search for them and found out they have a family foundation called Vertigo. I don't know if you all are finding this, but in the old days, we were able to search a family's name, and that was what the family foundation was called. Now they're getting really clever at what they call their foundations, and it might be called the Forest Road Foundation. And we have no idea that they're associated with that person. So it's making it even more difficult when we look at how do we actually look for information. Okay, I was able to find the Allen Foundation, which was what it was before they named it the Vertigo Foundation. And then I went on to foundationcenter.org, and then I was able to go onto GuideStar and look at Charity Navigator. Okay, so you see how this is working? And then corporate research, we're not going to go into a lot of this. You all got this, right? We don't need to do one more of this. Okay, corporate research, corporate research. It's really interesting. When you use those quotes, I have pulled up things that I should never have seen. I was looking for something for a nonprofit, so I put in the name of the nonprofit, plus, and then quotes around annual report. I pulled up their confidential executive committee of the foundation meeting. I'm like, and so what I think happened was somebody put it on like a Google Drive, and it had public access. So, yeah, and I called him and said, you need to get this off of there right now. But you can do the same thing with companies too, with corporations. You can sometimes pull up their annual report. You can pull up meetings they've had. You can pull up what their interests are, because there's a lot of places we can go with this corporate. We talked about matching gifts, and you all know what matching gifts are, right? It just means that the person works for the company. They give you $1,500. They submit to their company they work for, and the company gives you $1,500. $1,300. So you just doubled your gift. Sometimes they don't give full one-to-one, and usually there's a limit, like up to $10,000 or something, but it's a good place to look. Other ways that corporations support organizations, whether it's through their marketing department, they might do a sponsorship, whether it's through their foundation, whether that they give money for events. So there's several different departments within corporations that you need to talk to. Okay, moving right along. Okay, so let's go to step 2, where we talk about qualifications. Are there any questions I can answer? Does any?
What software do you recommend for tracking?
Okay, so she asked, what software do I recommend for tracking? So we're lucky enough to have databases now that are free. Like Bloomerang, I don't represent Bloomerang I don't get any kickback or anything, so just so you know. Bloomerang I like because up to a certain number of constituents it's free, and then it's only, I think the next level is $19 or something. There are a number of different databases, and I have done this research for several nonprofits, and usually what we go with, depending on how much the nonprofit has to put into it, it may be Bloomerang, it may be eTapestry. eTapestry is a Blackbaud product. Blackbaud, I was more familiar with Razor's Edge, but it's way expensive, and the nonprofits I was working with couldn't afford it. But eTapestry is less expensive. It is more expensive than Bloomerang. There's a lot of other ones out there. I just used one, Donor Search. No. It was horrid. It was awful. I couldn't wait to get out of it. It was just, be sure if you're going to get one, talk to the company, say, let me do a demo, give me access so that I can put some of my people in there, see what kind of reports I can get, and see if it works for you. Again, it depends on your nonprofit as to which database works well. And then if you're asking the question about prospects, I just use an Excel spreadsheet. Again, because I don't like to put prospects into my database and muddy the database. Okay, any other questions I can answer? Okay, so let's keep moving. So let's go into the qualification piece. Okay, so first thing is you're looking for that peers. Review it with your development committee and team, your board members, whatever. This is a good thing. If you have an advisory committee, a lot of times what nonprofits do is when people rotate off the board, so if you have term limits on your board, people rotate off the board, then they go on to an advisory committee. A lot of times your major donors are on an advisory committee. That's a great place to run some of these names past. So the advisory committees maybe just meets a couple times a year, and you might have one meeting that's just a fun meeting one time a year, and then the other time you say, okay, we're going to get down to business and we're going to work. We need your help with some of these people that we've been trying to connect with. You show them names. You want to qualify them by their financial information, not just what they've given to you in the past, but what you found that they may be able to give. And then it was funny, I was talking to Dana from Colorado Gives yesterday, and she was telling me that we get gifts from Colorado Gives, and she said, and then we don't steward them. We don't nurture these people. And they've given us a test gift. So she said, if we as nonprofits would go into our Colorado Gives and take a look at that we could probably find some new donors, because she knew I was doing this presentation today. So she said that was someplace that she'd recommend that we go. Okay, somebody that participated in a special event, their family or friends have been involved in the past. I will say one thing about peer-to-peer fundraising. So here's what I've seen, and you all can tell me if you've seen something different. Okay, so you're running a race, right? And you tell all your friends, oh, give money to this organization because I'm running a race. And so their friends give money, and oh, wow, they raised their $5,000 or whatever it is. So then the race is over, and we try to steward that donor. What happens? Nothing. Because why did that person give money? Because their friend asked them, not because they had a connection to the organization. And I try to help nonprofits think through this as to why are you doing this event, and do you think that it's going to get you new donors? Because most of the time, the nonprofits that I've talked to, once the event's over, people unsubscribe to the newsletter, they don't want any contact. And again, if we go into it knowing that that's exactly what we're doing, is just supporting whatever the organization is. So if they participate in a special event, so I would take the peer-to-peer out of that. And then if they've involved family or friends in the organization, or that they have volunteered. Okay, so this is the chart that I came up with, and this is a combination of a lot of different charts that I've found. Okay, so if we look in the lower left-hand corner, so it starts out on that bottom axis, the horizontal one, identification, interest, involvement, and investment. Okay, so where does that donor fall on that scale of 1 to 5, that potential donor? And then what is their gift capacity? That's on the vertical axis. So that's their giving capacity. So as you see, somebody who is a 1-9, so they're still in identification, they have a lot of money. That's Bill Gates, right? So he's probably not going to be high on our hot list of people that we want to look at. Okay, but we go over to 3. Okay, so they have some interest in your organization, and then we go up. Their gift capacity is a 5, and this 1 to 10, it can be different for each of your organizations. So some organizations, it may be $100 is a 1, and $1,000 is a 9. Some of your organizations might be 5,000 at the bottom and 100,000 at the top or something. What I do is, I would recommend you do this, to look through your database. If you have a database, do a query. If not, sort everybody on your Excel spreadsheet. Try to see what your first gift, your test gift, try to see what that test gift is, and you're going to determine it by, that's the first time they gave, and then you see that they give more, and they substantially give more, and that's going to help you know where they're on the scale to 1 to 9. Okay, so we have a target prospect at 3 to 5. Okay, so that's where we want to start. And then it goes all the way up to a 5-9. So a 5-9 means they're so involved in your organization, and 9 is the giving capacity code. Now, do we have people who are 5-9 that are never going to give a single penny to our organization? We are. They're not philanthropic or something, but we just know that. We know they haven't given to any other nonprofits. They're not going to give to us. But basically, that is where that we want to get to, between the 3-5 and the 5-9. Now, the kicker with this is, if you multiply times 2, that's how many times you're supposed to do something to steward them. Because we add the two numbers together. So if we add the 5 and the 9 together, we've got 14. That's a superb prospect, right? We add the 1 and the 9 together in the upper left, and we get a 10. Nah. So they're fair. They're not somebody I would put on my list. But now, multiply times 2. So multiply the 5-9, which is 14 times 2. That's 28 touches in a year. How does that feel? Like, ew. But a touch for somebody you're trying to develop a relationship with could be anything from seeing them in the grocery store and you have a meaningful conversation with them. It could be just an email. Hey, I was thinking about you and just wondering how you're doing. It could be anything. 28 sounds like a lot to me, so I wouldn't aim for 28. But you can just get an idea that, hey, it's up there. So when we look at prospecting, for all of your effort to pay off, for all of the research that you've done, you've got to carry through with it. And granted, I know that some of us are a one-man, one-woman show. And you say, Robin, I don't have time for this. If you put a system in place, you'll have 15 minutes before your next meeting. Before that next meeting, why don't you just do some really quick research? Because you've got everything there in front of you. And that's why I do the chart I showed you earlier. So that's always laying on my desk so that I can see that and say, oh, I need to be. In this last year at Vail Christian High School, I'm phasing out of my position at Vail Christian High School and back into fundraising consulting. I have been nurturing, are you ready for this? 235 potential prospects since the 1st of July. And this system has worked for me. It's taken me 9 months to get a meeting with some of these people, but it has worked. I would not suggest 235. It's just that the school needed new donors, and so I needed to find a way to begin nurturing them. But don't overwhelm yourself with it. Come up with 5 names. Okay, let's see if I can find a connection to these 5 names, because that's the key, is finding the connection. Okay, here are some rules of thumb, and this is on your handout that you got. So we can expect a prospect to give 5 to 10% of their annual income. Okay, so how do we find out their annual income? Any ideas?
Annual report.
Okay, an annual report from a company, good. How else? How do we know what their annual income is?
Their mortgage.
Mortgage, she said, okay. How else?
$990.
Okay, if they have a family foundation, their $990 may help. What's in the foundation, the family foundation? Where else? How are we going to know how much money they make to know that they can give 5 to 10% of their annual income?
Peers, people that know them, work with them.
They're what?
Peers, people that know them,
Peers,
and work with
exactly. So she said peers, people who know them, people who work with them. Because I guarantee you, if you start asking peers, what they're going to say to you is, oh, he makes a ton of money. A lot of times, they'll tell you how much he makes because they know their peers have talked about this. So that's one of the best ways. Another way is when you look at other annual reports and you see how much they've given to other organizations, you may be able to backtrack on this and see and say, oh, okay, so I know where their giving level is. And what that helps us do is instead of asking for $1,000, we ask for $10,000 or $100,000 based on what we know about them. I wouldn't ask for $100,000 on the first gift. Okay, their total real estate value times 4 times 5%. That's only when the houses are over $500,000. Again, on the assessor's website, you will be able to know how much their house is. This is one of the easiest ways, I think, to figure it out. Their total stock holdings. Sometimes the stock holdings will be, if you look at wealth management software, and then 5% of their total known assets. So sometimes, depending on how much stock they own in a public company, you'll be able to figure that out too. Okay, screening software. Does anybody use wealth screening software that they love, that they would recommend? Anybody? Okay, so I just finished a year of using Wealth Engine. So Wealth Engine, I'm going to say it's somewhere around $2,500, $3,000 a year, which for most of us nonprofits, that's just way out of the realm of what we can do. But Wealth Engine is very good at telling you their annual income, their birth dates, their stock holdings, as long as it's public stock. You can't see their private holdings, their wife's name, so it's great. Then there is also, if any of you, do any of you use eTapestry or Razor's Edge? Okay, a few of you. So that's a Blackbaud product. That is the best wealth screening software I've ever used. And I don't quite know why. They bought this company, and it's a mystery as to what company it was. But after they bought this company, then it populated their wealth screening software. If you can afford that, and it's probably somewhere around, I don't know, $2,500 to $4,000, depending on how many people you have in your database. But here's the good news. As I was searching this the other day, there are companies that have now come on the market that are competing with them. And so I found, and again, I'm not saying that I've used any of these. I don't know how good they are. There's one called NPO Authority. Has anybody heard of that? NPO, so N as in Nancy, P as in Paul, O, authority. $1,200 a year. So, that a lot of this searching, that can cut your time tremendously if you have the good wealth screening software. There were a couple of others like Donor Search, which I haven't used. Double the Donation was another. Time Trick, Timetrick, and then iWave. Wealth screening software helps tremendously, but again, if you don't have the money. Now, one of the things you could do is go to your local library and say, hey, how about some wealth screening software? We think it'd be great for the local nonprofits. That's how come that some of the libraries got the grant software, is because enough of us went to them and said, hey, we need this. This is what's going to help us. And it helps the library too, right? Because then they can also search. You may try and just see. Okay, prospect management system. Okay, so this is what we're looking for. We're looking for people who can make gifts. The gifts themselves we're looking at, and then the actions that move a prospect in the right direction. It's pretty simple. Those are the three things. Okay, it shows a record for every prospect of his or her gift expectancies. So what do you expect? So I do something called a gift model. What the gift model is, it has a history of their gifts. So whether you have a 3-year history or a 5-year history, so it's an Excel spreadsheet, and so you have their name, what their gift history is, and then you determine what do you need to be asking them for? What is the next step? Some of them you'll see a natural progression and you'll say, oh, they gave 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. You know what to ask for, right? But other times it goes back and forth. They'll give like a huge gift and then they'll give a tiny one and then they'll give another huge one and then a tiny one. So all the research that you've done is going to help what can I actually ask them for. So it will turn that prospect into somebody within your database that you can actually move to the next level with moves management. Again, prospecting within your database can be as profitable as going out and doing all the research that we're talking about. Okay, where were we? Okay, so the prospect can be in one of 4 stages. They can either be in research, they can be assigned, qualified, or disqualified. So what I do on my Excel spreadsheet, when somebody like the person I was telling you that says I would never give to a Christian high school, I put her in red. I don't want to take her off because my memory's not what it used to be, and I may in the future go back to her and think, oh, she's a good prospect. So I keep her on the list, but I highlight her in red so that I know she is never going to give to us, and I don't want to waste time on that. Okay, the general rule of thumb, when we are talking about the stages that somebody is in, so that not to be confused with the status is it a prospect or is it not? So when we talk about the stages, the best model I've found is 25% of our portfolio should be in research. So now think about that. Your portfolio should be 120 to 150 people. That is, if that's all you do is fundraising. If you're executive director and you do 10 different things, there's no way you can carry a portfolio of 125 people. But if you, let's say, have a 125 people portfolio, 25 of them should be in research, 60% should be in romance. So think about romance. That's when we're trying to woo them, right? We're trying to get them involved. 5% in requests, so that's asks, and then 10% in recognition. So when we think about how our board members are so against having to ask for money, some of them are fine with it, but the majority of them, oh, don't make me ask for money. So why don't our board members want to ask for money? Why don't they?
Uncomfortable.
Exactly. Exactly. So because they think if they ask this person for money, that person's going to turn around and ask them for money. And they don't want to do that. So that's why they don't want to ask for money. What I do with my board members is I say to them, you do not have to ask for money. That is not what we're asking you to do. All we're asking you for are connections. So that relieves them a little bit of that stress. But until we do it a few times, they don't believe us. And so we have to show them. So I have a board member, and I asked him, would you connect us with this person? He said, sure. This person had given in the past. He hadn't given in the last couple of years. And I said, you don't have to ask for money. That's what I'm here for. We won't ask today if it doesn't feel right. So I don't want you to be uncomfortable. He said, fine. So we're on our way into lunch, and he turns to me. He said, can I ask for money? Can I do that? And I'm like, do you want to? He said, yeah, I do. And I said, okay, so let's talk about how you're going to go about doing it, how much you're going to ask for. And you could tell he was just all a Twitter. It was like, this was the coolest thing for him to get to ask for money. He asked, and the donor said, yeah, and the donor gave more than he had ever given before. So I told him, I said, don't go back and tell the other board members that you asked for money, because then they're going to say, yeah, so Robin's lying to us because she said we didn't have to ask for money, and here she made you ask for money. So he made it into a big joke. But if all they have to do is connect us, that's all we want them to do, is just make a connection. Our volunteers, the same way. Just connect us and help us help the organization. Eventually what's going to happen is, like the person I was just telling you about, some of them are going to say, oh, it looks like fun, let me do it. And eventually some of them are going to want to ask for money. Some of them never will. They won't ever ask you for money. But getting them to help you with the connection, so that's what that romance piece of 60% being in romance, your board, your volunteers, your major donors are key in that romance piece. So if only 5% are in request, does that make us feel a little bit better? Oh, okay. Every time I meet with somebody, I don't have to ask for money. I heard this one development director on the phone, and she said, I heard her say, yeah, all I do is ask for money. That's all I do all day long. That's what my job is. I'm like, you need to find a new job if that's all you do all day. Because somebody was saying to me this morning, they said, there are people who are really good at asking for money, and then there are people who aren't. And some people are just better at it. And I believe that everybody can be trained to ask for money, because if you get to the point where, and this is a game I play, is getting to the point where the donor says, wow, how can I help? That is my goal with every single donor. I want them to ask me how much money they should give. So how can I help? So if you go at it from that direction, now, do I have to ask for money? Sure, I have to ask for money. Sometimes they're never going to get there. Maybe they know my game. But sometimes they're never going to get there. But for the most part, they are going to get there. Okay, we talked about that. So prospect management system, we already talked about high scores, and then the high likelihood to make a major gift, large gifts in the past to other organizations, etc. Okay, so this is a printout from a wealth engine screening, just so you can see some of what it tells you, like how much money that they could possibly give. It tells that they're excellent, like a 1/0. And so anyway, so this is what it looks like if you haven't seen it. And then it tells every organization they've given money to and how much they've given. So it's a wealth of information. And then this is just examples from wealth screening. Okay, get the gift, repeat the gift, upgrade the gift. That's all your job is. That's it. That's it. Those three things. Easy, right? Because it's all about the right person asking the right prospect for the right gift, for the right program, at the right time, in the right way. Right? That's easy. Okay, so here's what I do. Once a week, I send a motivational tip. It's one sentence Nobody has time to read any more than that. I don't have time to write any more than that. If you take your phone out, activate your camera, you don't have to take a picture, activate your camera and put it up there, then what it will do is it will let you sign up for that tip. You can unsubscribe at any time. It's through Constant Contact. Is it working?
It says move closer.
Oh, you can move closer. Okay, I promise you I won't sell your name, I won't do anything with it except send you a tip once a week, because what I'm finding is that nonprofits that I work with are like, oh, they'll call me and they'll say, oh, can we just get together for a cup of coffee? I just need to hear you. Okay, so did that work for everybody? Okay, so here's an option if that's not working, because I don't want you to get frustrated. Go to the text on your phone and text 42828. So up in the number that you're going to call or text to, it's 42828. And then down in the message, just type the word prospect. It doesn't have to be in all caps. Just type the word prospect and then hit send. And that better work. It's my new whiz-bang system, Constant Contact. Did it work?
I did it both ways, but I don't get service over there.
Oh, the QR code worked? Cool. He doesn't get service, but the QR code worked.
QR codes are turned out.
Okay, did it work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, these were the learning objectives from the beginning. So let's just go through. Did you learn some specific steps to prospect for major gift donors?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know how to discover their personal interests now?
Yeah.
Do you understand what prospect research is and why we're doing it? How about, did you get helpful tools and resources? And then did you get tips and ideas for prospecting within your current database? Okay, so any questions I can answer before you all take off? We're getting out of here 8 minutes early. Yes?
Can you provide all of your slides?
Yeah, so
Just a subset?
So if you want my slides, just send me an email, fundraiser@robinthompson.com, and I'll send you the PDF if you want all my slides, besides just the handout. I tried to save paper and just do that. Yes?
Did you mention you have a book coming out? When does that mean?
That's a good question. I'm hoping, what I've done is I've taken that book and divided it into 3 areas as I've talked to people. There's one book on how to be a successful executive director. There's one on how to be a successful development person, and one on how to be a successful board member. I'm trying to do all 3 of them at once. So it's probably going to be a couple months, but stay tuned. I will put it in the email at some point and say, hooray, everybody celebrate with me. But thanks for asking. Yes?
Do you have any other useful search tips, like the wildcards or any other tips for searching on Google?
So he just asked for any other tips for searching on Google. Does anybody else have any that they use that they like for searching on Google? Anybody? There's a lot of different ways that you can skin the cat, basically, but I like the quotes and the wildcard.
So you put the quotes around the plus sign as well?
No, the quotes don't need to go around the plus sign. The quotes only go around because what it's telling Google is that I want to search this person's name only. Okay. And I want to search it only in this area. So the plus goes in the middle. Yeah?
Do you have any resources for donor cultivation models?
For what?
Donor cultivation models?
Yeah. For donor cultivation models, I just usually make my own up because every nonprofit's different. And so the 10 Touch, even taking a tour or participating with some people in the programs or whatever. So usually it's a little different.
It's really specific.
Yeah. So if you want to email me, I'll tell you about my 10 Touch and just see if that may work for you. Okay, you're welcome.